Sorry guys, I don't know what happened there. My iPad just took a shit and I don't know what's going on with it. It's not a battery issue. Don't know what the fuck's up. But I'm gonna wait here and see if you guys show up. Hopefully we'll all figure it out and get right back on track. So now I'm on my iPhone and the iPad has been relegated to the pile. Hopefully I'll be able to get it fixed. So, I'm sorry for that. So we'll see what if this works. There's one of you. There's one. Let's keep them coming. Two of you. There's four of you. There we go. All right, the lawnmower part. It is. Let me see if I can. All right, I don't remember what it's called. It's like a it's like a little like what was it that you called it before? I don't remember. It might be what it's actually called. But if you go to the hardware store, I'm gonna draw one for you. Let's see if I can find a dry erase marker. Hang on. Man. A coupling nut. Maybe I don't think it's a coupling nut. Okay, so that no, it's not a coupling nut. So let me see if I can find my dry erase pen. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna try to draw. It's got like a cylindrical situation like that, and then kind of like that, right? Got like a little pass-through hole, and then there's like a screw on the end here. So they kind of that looks like a dick. They kind of look like this, right? It's got like a little hexagonal end here. It's a little smaller in proportion, like that, right? And it's got a pass-through hole here. Okay, and this is a screw here. That's like a set screw. And what this does, it's for attaching the throttle assembly, right? Oh, you know what? I think I might have a little. I think I might have one here that I could show you. So your throttle wire or cable would go through here, right? And then this screw would tighten this way to set that in there. Let me see if I think I might have one here. Nope. I thought I did. All right. I have these old side shaft go-kart or mini bike motors over there, and I thought one of them would have it on there, but they don't. All right, there's four of you back. We were talking about the tube vise thing. And it's a pinch from the front, so I'll have more questions once we're all back on. Oh, what a bummer. There's a rust preventative on these that should be stripped with acetone. And there we go. There we have it, stripped with acetone. RIP headphone users. Got about a third of us back on here. Hopefully everyone figures it out. I gotta say, these parts from Eminent Machine Supply from Aaron Bloomquist are really nice. Quite pleased. They're just beautiful. I'm a big fan of knurled cores. I'm not a huge fan of the T-tops. And I like the clips, okay, but I love the knurled ones the best. They're my favorite. What would be your setup to make a machine move 18 round and still be 130, 140 HZ? You're gonna want, hang on, let me dump this out here. So to get that speed and still have a resilient back spring, let's see. Let me see if I can find something that does that so I can just show you. Plenty of examples in here. Let's see. What's up?
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so this one here, this runs, let's see, let me run that again. 136, super high amps though, huh? The amps are kind of high on this guy, so I'm not going to use that as an example. Well, setup should be basically the same. Shorty coils would be my go-to. Nice and strong, and they cycle really fast. So that would be, so you want something that hits really hard, but still gives you that speed. So you kind of have to use all the stuff that does both. Like, so, you know, to get speed, you want a lightened armature bar and a shortened back spring, and a 22 capacitor and some shorty coils. And to get that strength, you need quite a bit of tension, right? So I would probably use a nice wide rear spring, tapered rear spring, like, you know, cut it from 3/4 inch stock and have it on a taper. So, I mean, there's really, like, the formula is gonna vary depending on the geometry of your frame, right? But if all things were the same, which they're not, but if all things were the same, when I say, you know, tapered rear spring, you want one that's, yeah, we can definitely talk about the Jonesy thing. I'm curious. Is it tapered rear spring like that, okay? And you want a nice short front spring, but you want it to have a little bit of bounce on the front spring, like this. See that little bit of that little bounce there before it disconnects. So you want a little bit of that because it's going to make it hit harder. And you're going to get your speed from your coils and your capacitor and your rear spring and the lightness of the armature bar. But you don't want to make the armature bar too light, because if you do, it's not going to have enough mass to do its thing. So again, it's really like, let's see, it's really about like finding the proper balance with all the variables considered. Figuring out, like, let's see how this one runs. I'm gonna guess this one's like 120. This one's like 130. It's not bad. Let's see. And the question about the Jonesy, was it a micro Jones or a brass Jonesy? Is it like one of these kind of deal? Is it like one of these frames? Hey, Conkus, the bounce on the front spring can come from tension on the front. It doesn't have to necessarily be from tension on the back. You can get it from tension on the front, and that will give you a lot of that force. Micro Jonesy. Okay, so let me ask you another question. Is the collet touching in there? Is that little piece, do you see that? Is that little piece kind of touching itself? Like, so when you have the collet, it should be like that, right? But eventually what happens with wear is as it closes in, it kind of just gets tighter and tighter like that. So is it a situation where the collet is almost touching itself? Because there's a fix for that. Gerard, yes, by bending the front spring up more. And this question is for Horst. Well, it is just to touch the contact screw, but if you want, you can change the way the machine runs. This is for Conkus. You can change it the way it runs by adding some bend to it to give yourself more force. So if the machine's not hitting hard enough, you can put a little bend on that front spring, and you can make the machine hit harder, but you will slow it down a little bit. Okay, so Horst, this is for Horst. Throttle control, cable stop clamp. There you go. All right. Let's see. I'm getting confused with all this. That's because I forgot to take my damn fucking ADD meds today. All right, it's touching itself in the upper part. Okay, so there is a trick for that. All right, I'm going to show you what to do. Hang on. Let's see if I can get rid of these chats for a second so I can see. How do I get rid of these? I can't see. Okay, hang on. All right, so what I do in that case, this is going to be a little tricky, but it works. And I haven't done this in a really long time. Okay, get yourself a hacksaw blade. Now you'll see that the hacksaw blade is too big to go in here. Okay, so what you need to do is modify this thing into a new tool, essentially. You want to take this hacksaw blade, go ahead and cut it in half like that, and then you want to cut so you don't cut yourself. There we go. Cut some width out of the hacksaw blade. Okay, and now you've made a little mini hacksaw deal like this, right? Okay. And I would probably, let's see. Get some tape. So it's a little bit less dangerous to hold, a little bit more like a shiv. Make yourself a little handle here. I'm going to clean up the end of that just a little bit. Okay, here's your new tool. It's a little chunk of a hacksaw blade with a smooth end on it. And then what you want to do is take this guy right in there like this and cut that slot back open. Right, so let me point this down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, come on. There we go. All right, and just like that. This is actually the fix that this one needs. Conveniently, this is for Joshua Rowlands if you're out there. And this is how you fix that. You open up that slot. Well, it should only take a few minutes, and that is fixed. I don't know if you can see that, but it opens that slot right up. And then you have a tool for all the rest of them. Okay. All right, does that make sense, dudes? All right, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, let's see. All right, so does that help? Does that do the thing you need it to do? Because that should open that right up, and it now that's fixed. Looks like this guy can use it a little bit too. I'll go ahead and, while I'm at it, open that up. That one's done already. Boom, fixed. Then you have another little tool to use whenever, and you can fix your coworkers' shit too, and amaze them. Charge them like 25 bucks to do it. Is the material for the armature bar yoke as important as the coil core material? Yes, absolutely. Ideally, you want to have the same material for your armature bar, your yoke, and your coil core. You definitely cannot use a non-magnetic material. You can't use a non-ferrous material. You only want to use something steel or iron, or an alloy thereof. You don't want to use stainless steel. You want it to have you want it to be super low carbon. You want it to be as close to pure iron as possible. You cannot, let's see, Hero, you cannot solder the collets without a blowtorch. You can use the little handheld torch guy. Let's see. You can get one of these. You can get one of these at the hardware store for like 25 bucks. And this just screws on to a little propane bottle. It's got like a little push button thing, and you can use one of these. Make sure you take the machine apart when you do it. And my recommendation would be to use some really lightweight silver wire, like this stuff. You're gonna want. This is like jeweler's grade. Really, really small silver wire. This is what you're going to want. I don't weld, so I'm sure you can TIG weld them if you don't pop through the collet. I don't weld, I just braze everything. I'd like to learn how to weld at some point, but in the meantime, I'm just using this. Oh, man. Okay, Joseph, what difference do different size rubber bands make using one of the thick boys as opposed to a couple thinner dudes? Well, what happens with your rubber bands is it adds a certain degree of resistance and or tension. And what I found with my stuff, and the way that I've always tattooed, is I like to use 2 number 12 rubber bands. For me, that's always been kind of the go-to, the appropriate amount of tension. Let's see if this. I guess that's only one. The thick ones, I think, for me, the thick ones create too much resistance and the machines heat up, and I think you're more likely to break springs. That's sort of one of the questions when I ask people when somebody tells me that they broke a spring on one of my machines. I ask them what kind of rubber bands they're using, if they're using plastic tubes or metal tubes, because a lot of that has to do with resistance, and then you're asking too much of that rear spring, right? So if you're creating more resistance by using big, thick rubber bands and plastic tubes, you're creating a lot of friction and a lot of resistance that will contribute to breaking a spring because you're turning your voltage up and you're overworking that rear spring. So that is something to be considered. You want to use as light a rubber band as you can get away with that will hold your needle in the bottom of the tube properly. Have an old wiener dog. When used for packing, it's getting very hot. It's probably not a problem with the rear spring at all. Do you have, question is for Horst about your wiener dog. Are you using one of the metered power supplies that will tell you the amperage? I'm curious at what amperage it's operating. And that's from there we can sort of track down why it's getting hot. I'm also curious as to whether you're using thick rubber bands or plastic tubes. Are you using plastic tubes or metal tubes? That would be for Horst. For whip shader, do you take a similar approach to dot work machines? I've never built a dot work machine, so I don't know. Or you just want to slam the pigment in without it bogging down. No, I like them to bog. I want it to bog down a little bit. I want some feedback, right? I want to. The main thing is I want. It's just as much about the needles as it is the machine when it comes to packing in solid color or whip shading or whatever, right? It's you know, and I use the same machine whether I'm coloring or shading or whip shading or packing or putting in solid black. I use the same thing and I run it exactly the same. The only thing that I vary is my my hand speed and the needle depth. So if I just want to whip shade, I'm floating the needles over the skin just a little bit more, and if I want to pack color, I'm sinking them in more. So the more you sink them in, the more of a bog it's going to have. And if you're just trying to whip shade, you're trying to just work off the tips and use the taper of the needle. So Horst, it might be okay. So try it with metal tubes. I'm just curious. Maybe if you have any metal tubes, run the machine with metal tubes and see if it still gets hot. And also see if you can run on someone else's power supply and see if it still gets hot for you, because it might be a power supply thing. It's just there's so many variables to consider without seeing it and without having it in front of me. You know, I need to once the world opens up again, I want to start doing some of these workshops in person, so that way I can get my hands on some machines and have, you know, more information in front of me. On the binding post with a 1/8 inch nylon ball, what type ended grub screw would you recommend? Just a regular, it doesn't matter, just any kind of set screw is fine. Really, you can use like let's see, hang on. These little guys, they've got like a little cup, and I like those a lot. You can also buy them with a nylon tip already attached. But on these ones that my son made for me, it's got like a little nipple, a little dent on the end. Like I had him braze the these nuts to the set screws. We used the little cup end inward. Those are fantastic. But anything will work. It doesn't really matter that much. It's not a science. It's just you know, it's just what we're doing. Let's see. They got these tiny ones here. Let's see. Yep, even these tiny ones have a little cup end. But you can get the ones with the nylon tip. Those are great. Or just use whatever you want. I mean, I use regular screws too. What is ideal amp for a machine to run for not to get hot? I shoot for under 3/4 of an amp, under 0.75. So if I've found that my stuff, once it gets over 0.75, it's going to start getting hot. Man, my allergies are kicking my ass. Okay. If I understand right, a good technique for whipping is turning the voltage way up and work more on the surface. Any preference on taper size? Yeah. Well, it depends on the effect that you're looking for. If you want to have a more pronounced dot, you want to use a shorter taper, right? So like, and this is going to be an exaggerated illustration, okay? Because, you know, so we're looking at, let's like long taper versus short taper. And these are exaggerated, right? Now, this one's going to leave a larger dot, right? Because you're penetrating like, you know, around in here, where like this one is going to be like around in here. So if you think about that on like you know, a fraction of a millimeter, right? You know, hundreds and hundreds of them on the surface of the skin. And then you think about, you know, the smoothest black and gray tattoos that you see versus like the chunkiest whip shading that you see. The dudes doing like the smoothest black and gray stuff are using long taper. A lot of times they're using those pens or cartridges, and they're working very, very lightly on the surface of the skin with hardly any saturation. And when you see somebody, you know, like Chad Keplinger's tattoos or Ed Hardy tattoos, where they're just like kind of rough and chunky and tough, it's a shorter taper, and it's, you know, it's deeper in the skin, and it's you know, your hands moving faster. You're whipping across the skin more, so you're getting like more space between the dots. So you're seeing the dots more. Not only are the dots larger, but there's more space between them, so you're seeing more of that whipped effect. What is the advantage of packing the coil cores with steel wool for conductivity? It's not about really conductivity. It's about getting rid of any dead air in your coils. The more what we call air gap in a magnet, the less efficient it's going to be. The more solid it is, the more efficient it's going to be. So when you fill up all those spaces, the coil is going to run more efficiently. And that's why a coil that is wrapped really smooth with all the layers really flat is going to run more efficiently than a coil that's really sloppy, because, you know, as all those layers line up, let's see if I can find an example for you. Hang on. Give me a second. All right, so this is a very nicely wound coil. There's very, very minimal excess airspace in here. When a coil is wound more sloppy, let's see if I can find a sloppy one. Okay, here's one. You can see the difference, right? It's not just about the amount of wire on the core, it's about that like unused, it's like that airspace in there, that space between the wires, right? That creates less efficiency. So when you look in the core, like this one, I can see the bottom of the tap. This one goes almost all the way to the top. This is going to be a much more efficient coil than this one. That's why, like BJ Soba, workhorse BJ, always, you know, he was always like tap them shallow. He always taps his coil cores nice and shallow, because you want to have as much of that mass as possible. And when you tap them really deep, when you drill them and tap them really deep, you're eliminating a lot of that mass, and you're creating a lot of dead airspace that doesn't really do anything. It doesn't function for anything other than just sort of absorbing that magnetism that needs to be up here, and it kind of just ends up floating around in the middle of that core, not doing anything, right? So you want to direct all that magnetism towards the top of the coil. So packing them, or not even drilling them that deep to begin with, would be ideal. Or using a longer screw, so that way, you know, if you're using too short of a screw, use a longer screw, and then you won't have to worry about packing it. But it's not going to hurt to put a little steel wool in there to fill that space if you really want to. Chris Harden, looking at going from an icon to a critical meter, never tuned with hertz. Wondering what is optimal for lining, shading, packing. What's optimal is what works for you. I mean, it's so different for everybody. You know, like it's so across the board. And I mean, I guess it's a good thing that we have the numbers, so that way when if somebody says to me they want a fast shader, my idea of fast shader might be totally different than their idea of fast shader, so I'm able to ask them to give me an exact number that they're shooting for, just as a reference point. So it's entirely up to you. For me, I like my liners to run around 125 to 135 for the ones that I'm using. If I'm looking for something really fast for like small groupings that I want to be able to move my hand super fast, I'm in the neighborhood of 150, 155. My shaders, I like them to run right around 100, like 98 to 101 is like ideal for me. That's like my shit. But, you know, some people want their shaders to run at like 125 and then, you know, 110 loaded. It's just, it's not about like shooting for a number. It's about shooting for a function. So like tune the machine how you want it to run, use the thing, and then make note of the number after you used it. Like forget about the numbers until you've done tattoos. And then once you get it to a point where it tattoos the way you want, then look at what the numbers are. But like the numbers come after, they shouldn't come before. Yeah. So yeah, Lonnie, the peppery stuff is you're gonna achieve that with a more blunt needle and a slower machine. I know this is a wide question. Speaking of CPS, what is an ideal CPS unloaded or loaded for a black and gray shader or color packer? Unloaded is for me 100, and that's like, again, it's personal preference, but like, let's see if I can find one of my favorite shaders in here. Let's see what this Jay Kelly thing does. This Jay Kelly machine, 92. And this thing rocks. But that's just me, like, it might be too slow for some people. But this thing hums perfectly for me. Let's see what this awesome James machine does. This one runs at 105. Also one of my favorites. James's machines are fucking awesome. Let's see. Conkus, bit off topic. Do you think we're already reached the pike on the tattoo? Oh, peak, maybe a peak on tattooers per customer ratio. If you think it's a temporary trend, and if many people will quit eventually. My personal opinion, I think that it's going to slow down. It's going to slow down for everybody at some point, and the people who are really committed are going to tattoo anyway, and the people who aren't committed are going to go back to their other jobs. I've always, like, in the last 10 years, I've seen more and more increasingly people kind of having tattooing as their second or third job, and they're like still a bartender or still a stripper, and they're kind of tattooing on the side because they enjoy it as a medium, and it's not like their career, right? And I do think that a lot of those people are going to go back to their other jobs when they realize that tattooing isn't as lucrative as they expected it to be. But you gotta either have to understand that everybody's trying to get a piece of the same pie, and you can only slice it into so many pieces, or you have to be willing to make new pie. And there are tattooers who, tattoo artists, tattooers, whatever, who have their own clientele that never would have been tattooed otherwise were it not for the style that they do. There are people whose work that like their style doesn't really appeal to me at all, but they have an incredibly strong clientele of people that never would have been tattooed by somebody like me, or by whoever, like it could be anybody. Like, maybe there's work that's never appealed to them before they saw the work of someone like Sean from Texas, or the people that do like the simple, like super popular line work stuff right now, right? So you're gonna see people kind of jumping on that bandwagon. With each new trend in tattooing, there will be like a handful of innovators that kind of form the new clientele, and the people that jump on and try to take some of that clientele. And I think if you're comfortable in what you do, and if you're good at what you do, and you've established yourself as somebody who does good, clean work, and you're not caught up in trends, then I think you're going to be fine. But it's like with anything else, with like motorcycle building or hot rod building or fucking any sort of trade like that. The people who do it because they love it are gonna stay with it and weather the storm, and you know, it will come back. It's sort of, you know, it goes in waves. You know, it always has. You know, there's been surges of popularity in tattooing with every generation, and with every generation, there are people who stick it out and people who quit. And I think that with so many people tattooing now, you're going to have a proportionate amount of people quitting. I think you're going to see, you know, if we had, you know, 100 new tattooers a day, you know, 60 or 80 of those are eventually going to quit. So I don't think it's anything to worry about long term. I think, you know, if you're looking at the big picture, it's not going to affect you if you're in it for the right reasons at all. You know, and if you're good at what you do, and you're, you know, you're not like trying to get rich from it, you're just trying to make an honest living, I think you will. It might just be difficult for a while, but eventually those people are going to go away. I think they will. Does FT measure the chatter of the machine? No, the FT does not measure the chatter of the machine. The FT measures what we call, what is referred to as follow through, okay, or like settle, right? So you have your, my hand's just not functioning today. Here's your contact screw, right? And here's your spring, okay? Ideally it's not. So there's your spring, right? Your front spring, and there's your contact screw. What we're talking about is how much of that is kind of like what we would call wiping, right? Where it's not just like a clean on and off, like, you know, where there's like the two surfaces that touch, right? Those two surfaces you touch. So rather than being like a clean open close, follow through is that little bit of movement that's like this, that little bit of wiping. That's follow through. And ideally you want that to be as close to zero as possible. You want it to be a clean open and close. Do I think coil machines will ever die out? No, of course not. I mean, I don't, you know, you know, most of the people that I know in tattooing are, you know, people from my generation, and 80-90% of them are still using coils. I don't think it's ever going to die out. I think that, you know, I don't know. I can't make these sort of predictions, but it seems like, you know, people, you know, new tattooers getting into it are using pens and rotaries, and people that have been doing it for longer are using coils. And I think that there's like, it's impossible to deny the romantic aspects of the coil machine, but it's also impossible to deny the efficiency of the rotary, you know. Yeah, rotaries are, I mean, you can't argue how functional they are. I mean, look at the tattooing that people do with them. It's ridiculous. Like, it's like, I got, you know, who knew that you could do tattoos like that? And I think the rotaries are the tools that are making some of that stuff possible. I think some of the work that you're seeing, it would be almost impossible to do with coils, you know. I can't line with rotaries anything bigger than a 7 myself. I've never tried to line with a rotary. I've only shaded with one a couple of times, and I did not like it. I tried it, and I was too nervous I was going to chew somebody up because I couldn't get any sort of feedback. I couldn't, like, it was a direct drive, so I wasn't able to get like that, you know, that bog that you look for with a coil machine. Yeah, I mean, I feel like my only limitation with coils have been with my ability. You know, I can't like blame it on the machine for like it not doing what I want it to do. I think it's just about like, you know, what I have the ability to do. New people are scared of coils. Well, I think new people are scared of coils because they're not taught how to make needles. They're not taught how to, you know, put machines together and tune them, you know, repair them. I think, like, you don't have to know how to build a machine, but you should know how to repair one, you know. neglecting that many of the really nice work with the photos see on social media. It's true, and most of the times is photo edited. You're probably right. I think that people do tattoos for the photo now instead of like for the tattoo. You know, they're doing it as like monuments to themselves and to build a portfolio. It's like, rather than like, you know, offering a service, they're like, get one of my drawings. I want to do one of these drawings. And if you get one of my drawings, I get to have a photograph of it, and then I get to do more of my drawings. You know, it's like, I think it's somewhat masturbatory and self-congratulatory. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think even before the big Rotary craze, you know, when people were like trying to get trophies at conventions all the time, the tattoos they were doing they looked like they were made just to last until the end of the convention. It wasn't like they weren't really built to last a lifetime. They were built to last like long enough to get on stage at the convention and win a trophy. Yeah, I mean that's how I started. You know, Lonnie, like what Gerard was saying, you know, being the shop's machine fixer upper, like that's how I started making machines and tuning machines. Like, you know, the guys I worked for were bikers, and they had a box full of broken machines. And you know, while you know most people, you know, most apprentices my age, you know, I was 18. We're more interested in like drawing and painting and shit like that. I wanted to tear apart all the machines in the shop and rebuild them. And that sort of just became like, I became the go-to for shit, you know. So rather than sitting around painting Flash, which those guys didn't know how to do anyway, they weren't able to teach me to paint Flash. But you know, instead of sitting around doing something artistic, I was either building needles for the shop or tuning people's machines. Thoughts on non-line realism and colorism? Do you think they will last over the years? I don't even think I need to answer that. We all know the answer to that. We all know what that shit's gonna do, right? I mean, we know that shit's not gonna last. Oh, now, how this happened? There we go. Let's see. I want to make a little fixture to set these little guys. I guess they're maybe a little too big. Probably just have to epoxy them. Damn it. Oh, that's perfect. All right. Sweet. Back on in a second. Yeah, the video froze because somebody tried calling my phone. And then I declined it, and then they tried calling right back. Fucking pain in the ass. A little longer. Anyway. I'm bummed that I broke my coil winder, so I'm waiting for one from the guy from VK Machines. I think his name's Mike. Waiting for a winder from VK so I can start winding some coils again. Let's see. Yeah, the Ink Master was fun. Actually, it kind of bummed me out, but four people cried that episode. I felt like kind of a dick afterward. Let's see. When I visit studios here, I always bring my machines around and offer to fix their tunes, fix their machines. I love it when you can fix someone's favorite machine. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the best. I enjoy fixing people's shit. All right, let's see. Besides the weight, do you see any advantage of an aluminum frame? Besides the weight, they're easy to machine. Super easy to machine. Why not just, let's see. Josh, any way to modify frames has a spot on the back to hold a rubber band better. I have one machine where I feel like they slip while I'm tattooing. Depends on the type of frame. But if, let's see. You get a little file like this that has a square edge. You can file a little notch. Well, depends on the type of frame. You know, if it's like this, there's all different ways. I guess it really depends on the style of frame it is. What style frame are you talking about that you need to put a little spot? That's for Josh. And Sean, do you have any thoughts on who has clean RCA conversion pieces? Why not just make your own? They're super easy to make. I can show you how to do that if you want. Really easy to make those. Super easy to make. Yeah, VK Machine makes really cool shit. I have a couple of like 4 of his jigs, and I have one of his armature bar fixtures. And they're dope. Need some freaking epoxy. Let's see. Sean, if you want, I mean, I can show you how to make an RCA hookup if you want. Super easy to do, depending on what frame style, but there's also so many different ways to do it. I mean, you could get some little, piece of aluminum angle iron if you want, or not angle iron, aluminum angle, like just like some of this stuff, and you just cut a little chunk of it, or a piece of scrap. Like I've got some scrap copper here, and you can just they're super easy to make yourself. You need a 1/4 inch hole. Actually, I guess you could get away with 2 1/4 inch. Well, depending on how you're mounting it. Yeah, 2 1/4 inch holes would do it, right? Do you want me to make one of these things or no? I guess we didn't really figure that out. What to use for hardware would mount it to the frame. Okay, well, I'll show you. I'm just gonna make a real rough one real quick. Give me a second. I'm gonna drill this out over here. Bear with me. So I guess I should drill it first so that way it's easier to hold. And then I'll cut it. So we got our piece with 2 1/4 inch holes in it. Make it a little bit narrower. This copper is a little soft, but it'll just give you the idea of what you're doing. Let's see, let me file this a little bit. Sorry about your ears. Just file the burrs off the thing. Okay, and then put an angle on it. Make sure that you leave enough clearance. So let's see. Let's figure out what machine we want to put it on. Let's say we're going to put it on this awesome James machine, right? So we're going to take off this rear binder. Let me find an Allen wrench. Okay. Now, the way that the RCA is set up is it's insulated, right? It's insulated kind of from, like, there's a positive and a negative. Let me find the RCA. Here's some RCA back. All right, so it's got a positive and a negative. Positive is going to come out of the middle. The negative is your ground, right? So you want to make sure that thing fits in there nicely. Put your lock washer on there and put your nut there, right? And get that thing nice and tight. Now I like to put a little bit of super glue in there because these things don't always like to stay tight forever, but you want to be gentle that you don't fuck up the shape of this thing because they are really thin and a little fragile. Okay, so there's kind of the beginning of your mount situation, and it being the type of frame that it's going on. I'm going to bend this at a right angle like this, and it's going to mount in here like so. Right now, what's going to happen is you're going to want to take this little soldering lug here and trim you want to cut it, trim the end of the circular end of the lug off and just leave a little tab there. I'm not going to do that on this machine because I love it the way it is. I'm not going to put an RCA on it for real. I'm just going to put this on here like so. I'm going to use this insulator on here to help line this up. But this is going to ground against the frame, right? So the outside of this housing grounds against this thing, which grounds against the frame, okay? And then your screw goes in here. I also like to trim a little bit of this off as well. This guy will go in here, like so. Get the insulator. That goes in there. And this goes in there. All right. And then I'll get a nut to hold that all together. Let's see. 832 nuts, where are they? Moved those. There we go. So I want to take an 832 nut, put that up in there, make sure this thing is all lined up. Super easy stuff, typically. There we go. I'll reach in there with a set of needle nose pliers to hold that guy in place, and then tighten this dude up. Okay, and now, so we're grounded against the frame, right? That's your negative. Okay, and then once you get this thing trimmed off here, right, cut off that string tubing, cut off the string tubing, and then cut off the loop, you're going to solder that to that little lead right there in the middle. And then you have your RCA right there on the back of the machine like that. You can adjust that as needed to get the right angle for yourself. And that's it. So to recap, the outside of this is the ground, okay? It attaches to the bracket, and the bracket attaches directly to the frame. The inside of this guy, the middle of the plug that's insulated with plastic, right? It keeps it separate. It keeps the positive and negative separate. That goes directly to the coil wire and the capacitor wire. So rear coil and the capacitor wire directly to that little dude there. If you don't have a soldering lug on here already, like if you're not converting a machine, if you're just building a machine that way, just run the wires directly to that. You can even pop them through that little hole if you want to and solder that. Just be careful not to heat it up too much because you can melt that plastic and cause a short. I also like to use a quarter to do that sometimes. You don't have to go out and buy a special piece of metal for that. Like you can literally just take a quarter and bend it and punch 2 holes in it and use that as your bracket as long as there's enough clearance. Also sometimes like you can like depending on the frame style, sometimes there's a hole already there that you can use. sometimes people don't mind. You can put it right through the bottom of the machine and have your cord there. Some people don't mind doing that, just sticking it right into the bottom and using that for your mount. Or let's see, this one here is probably a really good example that you could use for that. This J. Kelly machine, you could put an RCA right in the side of the machine here. You don't even need to make a bracket, and it's pretty much ready to go. You could just pop one right through there. Now, I will say that on a machine like this, you want to make sure that you remove some of that paint so that way you get a proper ground. If you leave the paint on there, it might not ground properly and it won't run. So if you do have paint, file that shit off. Doesn't have to be both sides, just one side. And then don't forget your lock washer and nut. Get that thing tightened up and then solder directly to the center lead. Boop, like right there. You can literally loop that around there like that and throw some solder on it, and now it's RCA converted. That's kind of a quick and dirty. But just remember that, like, that's how they function, is by the positive being separated from the negative, like by, there's like a little housing, right? So the RCA, it like has this little plastic sleeve and then a tab there, right? So your plug goes in here, right? The let's see, here we go. Right here. Okay. Your positive and your negative are separated. You see there's like a little plastic insulator in there, right? So this is your positive and this is your negative. You have to remember that on the outside of your RCA jack, this is the negative, and in here is the positive. Okay, and there's a plastic insulator that goes all the way through that you need to make sure you don't melt when you attach your wires here, right? So this piece here, this negative exterior, this ground housing needs to go to the frame, and then the wires need to go there. This reminds me, I think for an Aaron Kane in 1 year, there's zero clearance to unscrew the Torx screws. Are there super slim bits or drivers out there? Wait, what to use for hardware to mount it to the frame? Just use your existing hardware, Sean. Just use like the nuts and screws that are there. The only thing different that I added, well, aside from the bracket, was this little 832 nut right there. I have a bunch of those sitting around. That's the only extra hardware that I've used other than making the bracket. So if you get like a quarter, literally a quarter, and one of these little nuts, you're good to go. I don't have any experience with Vlad machines. Let's see, what else? And I don't know what you mean about zero clearance on the Aaron Kane or on mine. If you can shoot me a picture to my Instagram, I can answer you directly. But I do have to go. I got to clean up and then go get my other what do you call it? The second half of my COVID vaccine. So I'm gonna go do that stuff. and then get on with my my other work stuff for today. So I will see you guys next time. Thanks for bearing with me, and I apologize for the link snafu earlier. Hopefully that'll stop happening at some point, and if not, we'll deal with it. Take care, dudes, and thank you again. This was fun.